trying to share my screen. Okay, Leo, can you share your screen, the presentation? I don't know what's happening to my missing
I will try.
rights to do that on my laptop, or like. Okay. Thank you. All right, then let's start. So, hello everybody. I'm Dennis. With me, Lena already introduced us, is Leo. We both work as business development managers for Trufi, and we will be presenting you, let's say, how we at Trufi try to digitize informal transport and like by mapping it and providing solutions for that sector. Go to the next slide, please. We brought a little agenda. So first of all, we will talk about Trufi in like 1 or 2 slides, who we are, what we like, what's our mission, vision, etc. So you guys see where we come from and how we then moved into the informal transport sector and how we digitize it. And then we will show some use cases, one like 3 of our more popular use cases or like most successful use cases. And at the end, Leo will do some closing remarks as well. All right, who are we? Trufi. So yeah, we are Trufi. We are a non-profit startup for informal public transport. We have a lot of people all over the world. The first app was developed in 2018 in Cochabamba, which you will hear about later as well. But are like a lot of the people that work with us as volunteers and like NGO members have been active in the mobility sector for far longer than or like reaching far more back than 2018. The official founding date or year of the NGO was 2019 with its headquarters in Hamburg, where yeah, let's say the core, like most people of the board are like 2 or 3, but all of our, let's say, important members that do the work, the hard work, etc., all scattered all over the world, which you can see on the right. So we do most of our projects remotely. And our mission is to improve public transport in general worldwide through digitization, which comes from the background that a lot of our people are connected to IT or are like developers, software developers, app developers, etc., that are somehow connected to the mobility sector. And it all started back then in Cochabamba. Yeah, and the vision is to give people in developing countries the possibility to choose public transport options because they're accurate, helpful, and attractive, like we are used to being able to choose between public transport systems here in, let's say, Europe, if most of you are from Europe, most probably, since you're in, yeah. And what we have as a flagship product is the multimodal journey planner, which is kind of like, yeah, which Leo will be talking about later as well. Yes, you can go to the next slide. You can see a short or like a summary of like most of our projects. So you can see that we are mostly active in like Latin America, Africa, and India. But we've also been gaining a lot of traction in Europe as well now, or like especially in German, in the city of Hamburg and Herrenberg, which were 2 very successful projects as well. Which is why we are like, which proves the point of us emphasizing on open data, open source for changing the mobility sector. And yeah, those 2 projects were really important for us and helped us develop. And yeah, you will hear some more about it later as well. Next slide. All right, I will hand over to Leo now, and he will tell you guys a little bit about informal transport and what it is, etc.
Thank you, Dennis. Greeting for all from Colombia, South America. I will talk about a little about the informal transport. Firstly, what we define informal transport. There is not a canonical definition of what it is, but we use this definition. In informal transportation is a transport that with no official stops, no schedule, no documentation of bus lines, No official network, transport network, but private agencies. Is the case in most places like Latin America, Africa, and Asia. It's hard to believe, but sometimes even the governments haven't information about the routes, the shapes, or where the buses go. And also we work with semi-formal environments that is a mixture of formal and informal. Is the case, for example, in Addis Ababa, we have metro that is entirely formal and minibuses at the same time. Or in La Paz, in Bolivia, we have a mix of the cables, gondolas, that is entirely formal and works with Trufis, with Trufis in La Paz. By the way, we use the Trufi name because Trufi is the name for the colectivos, for the minibuses in Bolivia. That's the reason of our name. And like I said, it's typical in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. Our mission is digitize the public informal transport, but the informal transport have a specific challenge. The main challenge, of the reason for all the challenge, is that the digitalization standard is called GTFS. Later I will talk about GTFS is designed for formal transportation. It's designed in rich countries that have formal, and sometimes the standard doesn't match with the condition of the informal transportation. Other challenge for this is that it's run by a lot of different operators. For example, in Cochabamba, each car have a different owner, and sometimes has different operator. This for each car, for each vehicle. Like I said before, often the authorities have no information at all about how the informal transportation move. Technically, one of the main challenges is that the vehicles stop anywhere to drop off and pick up passengers anyway. And the standard demands stations, and that's one of the main goals technically, because we need to create fictional station in some cases. And it's a transport that is subject to road changes without coordination with central authority. For example, in Cochabamba, the unions take decision about the route without any coordination. And it's difficult to keep updated all the data from, in the case of an app. For example, in Trufi, in Cochabamba, is one, the main challenge is keep updated all the data. I would talk a little about how we do this or face this challenge, and how we do this digitalization. Our methods are a little different. But before I will explain a little what is the GTFS standard. It's important because all our technology and our products and services are based in a standard. And recently, the standard for entire world for the schedule, the trips of the public transport is the GTFS, is the General Transit Feed Specification. It's a standard that starts with Google. Is the standard that use Google in Google Maps, but a lot of apps is working now with that. Mainly is a standard, a specification that allow public transit agencies to publish their transit data in a format that can be consumed by a wide variety of software applications, including Trufi. Is now the standard used by 1,000 of public transport providers in this moment. One of the goals of the Trufi work is in some phase. Later, Dennis explain what is the different status of our approach to a city. But one of the main goals is to generate this data. But to generate this data, you can contract a lot of people and expertise and travel to the city. But instead of that, in Trufi, we work with the local communities. We connect with people that works in OpenStreetMap community that are enthusiastic of mapping, and with some institutions like the universities or local governments or schools, and we created data with the local, with a direction from our side, and but all the field works is made by the local community. We work in this case with OpenStreetMap. We teach people how to put bus routes in OpenStreetMap, the bus route, the shapes, and the schedules and frequencies. We can put this information in OpenStreetMap, and then we generate the GTFS files that are these files are the base to run our app. And based on this, we develop an app for every city, and then we generate data for the city of the community that help to improve planning for the city. Is important remark that the data generated for all the process, the routes and the data of the pattern of use is owned by the community, not a big company or us like Trufi. Is owned by the community. So, technically, we can use OpenStreetMap. We prefer use OpenStreetMap, but we can use another source of data, for example, shape files of other source, or if the city have the GTFS, you can use another GTFS, but we prefer OpenStreetMap for the community engagement. And we create the GTFS standard, and we release the data. If it's the case, if a city wants to release, in the most of the case, we open this data at the public domain, and not only can use this data, other projects like Google itself or Wallaby or Transit or Move or other apps can use this data. Our flagship product is the Trufi app. It's an app based in open source or entirely open source in any phase. Even, for example, the tiles generated by the map are open source. All the algorithms to generate the planification, like OpenTreePlanner, is open source. It's entirely open source. Is created in Flutter and OpenStreetMap and MapTiler. This is the technology behind, and is full door-to-door. This is important because we integrate multimodality. We can integrate not only informal roads. We can also integrate bike sharing, bikes. It's the case of Hamburg. We can integrate trains and pedestrian and something in the same planification. It's entirely door to door and is customizable and entire white label. It means that a city can use your flag, your color, the branding, like a propriety app, and is our license is AGPL. I pass the presentation to Dennis. Dennis.
All right, thank you. So you've heard a little bit about what informal transport is. So just to summarize again, like there's no stops. The cities don't have an overview of their running bus operations in the city, but also users are not having any information on the bus system, etc., which makes it hard for them to use it. Which is why, to tie it together with the vision of ours, we focus on really bringing the information. Like, of course, the first step is digitizing the information, but it's about, in the end, bringing that information, providing it, of course, to the city, but mainly offering it to the user in form of an app in this case, for example, or in the case of our flagship product, so that the users now see, okay, oh, there's buses running near my house, I can use those instead of a car, for example, which is why we are focusing on that part. I'm going to be showing you some use cases now. You should go to the next slide. But before we start with the use cases, we put together a slide of, like, as we called them, like the 4 levels of action. That's not like an official term that you can Google and find. We just called them like that because at Trufi, or like the mobility projects that we usually do, they can be kind of split into 4 levels, which you can see here, which we decided to be like the data collection level, the route planning or route planner app level, the multimodal integration level, and the city planning level. If you like, going back to the slides where Leo showed the process of building a community, collecting the data, having the app developed, and then providing the city first insights into the public transport data, and like them being able to do traffic planning. This is like also the 4 levels. So we usually, or like we have projects where it's about the data collection, and then the city doesn't want the app, for example, because there's another app already. So we don't need to implement an app. We have apps, we have cities or like projects where it's really about collecting that data, which is like more community-based projects where it's about collecting the data and providing the data to the users and to the public transport users, especially, or future public transport users. And then there's more complex projects where it's really about, okay, you have a lot of data pods. Those are like the projects in Germany that I mentioned earlier that I will show. You have a lot of different data pods or databases that you can integrate into that multi-model journey planner, where it's about, okay, I want to get from A to B. How can I get there the fastest, the cheapest, the safest, whatever. So there's like different ways of doing that. And then you just integrate with, okay, you can take the bus, and then you take a scooter for the last mile, for example. And that's a way of tying together all the mobility services that a city has in the end. And the city planning level is, yeah, the level where pretty much that is based on all the others, or like dependent on the others, because in the end you need the data, you need the app that generates data around usage of lines when users look or search for lines and you suggest routes, for example. You can have all of that usage data, and therefore the city can see, oh, okay, this route, for example, is being used quite a lot, so we could deploy more buses here to improve the operations, for example. And that's more on a like planning level and data dashboard, like infrastructure improvement level for the city. Now we'll go to the use cases. Next slide. Where we will also start with one of our use cases where it was like I just mentioned, we only collected the data, which is in Nouakchott in Mauritania. So the city approached us as we are able to fulfill all, let's say, almost all 4 levels that I just showed. The city approached us and asked us if we were able, or if we can help them map their public transport system, especially their semi-formal transport routes around buses, because they haven't been digitized and mapped at all. And for that project, for example, we also applied all of the steps that Leo mentioned of like going into the city, connecting to the local communities of OSM OpenStreetMap, which is like the, let's say, the standard that you use pretty much for mapping and for map apps and services, etc. And we went into the city, worked with the city, worked with with another partner that helped us finance the project, and then we trained the people, built a local community, gave the people all of the necessary tools. But it also starts with steps like telling the people to go, like to just take a pen and paper, jump on the bus, ride it all day, and write down where it stops, for example. So it goes down, like our approach really goes all the way down to that case, which is, yeah, a lot of times necessary to digitize the data and improve the informal transport, but not a lot of organizations want to do because it's so hard to track down and standardize that data around the informal transport sector, because also it changes a lot of times. So as Leo mentioned, the buses drop off and pick up people at whatever street or corner, and those routes change, and what you want to do with the GTFS standard is try to not to oppress, or like oppress maybe is the wrong word in English, not to put a system on them, but showing them the benefit of having the same bus stops, for example, at the same times, etc., like we are used to here in Europe, let's say. And for this project, yeah, we then created the GTFS data. We mapped everything, collected everything with the help of the community, and mapped it to OSMs. So it's available, open source, online. And then we also took, with mapillary photos are like, on OSM you can add data to the routes and to the streets, so you can add street data, etc. And with mapillary, for example, we took photos, or like the people took photos of the bus stops, etc., so that you have that information as well. Okay, there's a bus stop, there's no bus stop, etc. And then we hand over the data to the city. And yeah, and just some facts. So it's like quite a lot of work in the informal transport sector, as I already kind of mentioned. But like people traveled like 400 kilometers, 55 hours. We traced almost 60 bus routes with like 60 GPS traces, and generated the GTFS files, and also did some social media campaigns to yeah, promote the project and get more help from people, because it's really like it's almost like a desk research project where people really, yeah, you need to keep them motivated and all of those things, because it's so yeah, how do you say, it's hard work. It's not easy to map informal transport. But this is like the project where, if you go to the next slide, if we look at the 4 levels, this is one of the projects where it really was, okay, you come in, you help us map this semi-formal transport, and then you give us the data, or like they own the data anyway. We don't want ownership of the data in the end, because we, as Leo or we mentioned, open data, open source is our approach. So you guys could go online and look for our code and implement the, I don't know, if somebody's from, I don't know, Berlin, you could go take our code and implement the application yourself and create the application for Berlin. So it's open data, open source. You can do whatever you want with it. We're just here to support the whole process of getting there. And this was, yeah, let's say the process where they wanted us to do the very first level, because they were not interested in a planner or like an app already at that time. So we just helped them with that. If you go to the next slide, please. Okay, if you this is Cochabamba that I've been talking about earlier as well. This is where all started pretty much. Our president and one of the founding fathers of Trufi went to Bolivia on for like social work, and he already had an IT background, and he saw that there was a need to, yeah, or an opportunity to improve the public transport through digitization, or like through IT in the end, let's say. And yeah, that's where it all started. With exactly an OSM community, like there was one already in Cochabamba, and we started at the same level, like with the Nouakchott project I just talked about. So in the beginning, and the community, they're still very active. We have a community manager there that interacts with the community all the time, to motivate them to keep the data up to date, because open data lives from like contribution of others and like all the stakeholders that are involved in projects. So yeah, you need to keep them active and involved in the process of working with open data, etc. So here we also collected the data, also in contact with some of the transport authorities in the city, but a lot of times that's not necessary. So the transport authority there, correct me if I'm wrong, Leo, they know about the application, but they see that it's quite successful as it's running or working right now, so they're not really interested in taking the ownership or like supporting the application more, because a lot of times they're also just not, they just don't like, authorities don't have the resources to do things like that a lot of times, because they have other priorities. So yeah, what we do is come in with a lot of volunteers, communities, universities, and try to help those authorities to showcase the benefit of doing this. yeah, we have local partners as well. And for that application as well, which is why I said it's the most successful, because it's also where it all started, and it's like it was our pilot city. It's the most successful city. Yeah, within like in the first 2 weeks after go live, we had like 5,000 users, which is like quite a lot for an open source application. And in the meantime, like as of yesterday, if you look into the Android store, so only Android, if you look into the Android store, there's like more than 50,000 downloads that have been done on that application, which is great to see because you see that the need is there, that people see the benefit of this application. And it might seem not so, it might seem very, when I started at Trufi, for me it was, and I wasn't really traveling like in Latin America and Africa. For me, this looked very trivial because we are used to things like this, like route planners where you can look up buses, etc. Uh, to us here, let's say in Germany, for example, that's very trivial. That's like you can Google and then you will get the most of the time you will get the results. But in like in countries like developing countries, there's like yeah there's no real coverage or like not really good coverage of like public transport information for end users, etc. Which is why most of the time, yeah, there's a lot of opportunity behind like digitizing all of that and bringing it to a standard so that other companies can come in and innovate as well. And this was if you go next, this is a slide where you can see what the work that we did pretty much. So on the left, you can see the city of Cochabamba with its roots. I think like 2 or 3 or 4 years ago. And yeah, we did some work with the community and extended that route network, or like that let's call it in an easy way, like information network around the buses in those few years by like 140 routes, which is quite a lot because now people from the outsides of the city have a way to get information on buses that go into the city, and they can plan their trips, they can plan how they get to work and all of those things. And this is a very like basic need that helps the people already there. Next slide. Yeah, and if you try to tie that to the levels, this is of course the routing planner level because it's the very first step of like digitizing the data and offering the insights on the routes and providing a trip planner so people can say, okay, I want to go from A to B, which routes or like which transportation is available around me. Next level. Next slide. And next level, I guess. Thank you. Yeah. So as Leo also mentioned, like our Trufi app is a white label app, which means you can take it, copy it, put your colors on it, and then you're good to go pretty much. This is one of the projects in Germany, the Herrenberg project, which is like the biggest project that we did in Germany. And this is also, as you can see, the application is also based on our Trufi applications. As I mentioned, it's like a white label, and you can just use it. The big difference here is that it's going more and more, so it's also open source, mostly open data. You have to fight with some of the operators in Germany for them to share data, but this is mostly like open data, open source, and the big difference between this application, for example, and the Cochabamba one is that here you start integrating the different services a city has that I mentioned earlier. So you can see on the right that you have a lot of different transport modes. If you look for routes, you can select, okay, today I'm going by bike. Today it's raining. I want to bike and park, or like park and ride with my bike, for example. So you can select the route suggestions for using your bike in combination with public transport. Same for car, like park and ride, and there's things that you can do in the application together with the city um, to incentivize people to use public transport more. Like if you look for car routes, the city in the application was developed with the city, and the city, for example, um, said, yeah, we don't want cars to be routed into the city center in a radius of like 500 meters. So the application, for example, now if you look for a route to the city, it suggests you parkings outside of the city center, so you don't have to drive all the way in, and then says, okay, the rest you walk, for example. And this is yeah, where we integrate everything. There's like e-charging stations in there, parking availability, so you can see how good the parking is, etc. And this is like already more next level, and not necessarily informal transport anymore, but we just wanted to show that although we started from informal transport, the need for open source and open data in the end is uh, is present everywhere, pretty much, and the benefits of it, yeah, are there as well, and that this grew out of the informal transport sector. Okay, next time. Next slide. Yeah, this is pretty much the same, just like more dedicated to, if you go one back, more dedicated to cyclists. So we used our application in terms of like, one might also think that you have all of the information I mentioned earlier. Informal transport has all of the, or like lacks the information around the bus routes, etc. And we are used to having that in Germany. But if you Google this, or if you would Google some routes that we did in Hamburg, for example, Google would also not give you all the routes because not all of the information is available or integrated in Google for even German cities. So in this case, for example, in Hamburg, I don't know, you might know Hamburg. There's a lot of water, as you can see in the picture, and there's like ferry transport as well on the water. And that ferry transport was not integrated in any application. So one of our, like, we saw that people were taking very long detours to get from A to B, although there's ferries that they could take, so that which would shorten their travel time by a lot. So we integrated that information as well, and made the route suggestions multimodal, which is what we did, or like what we know how to do. And this is also based on the open source application in the end, which helps in the informal transport sector. So it's really about making all of the public transport visible in Latin America, Africa, where it's informal. Just here, it's similar in a lot of cases because the data is not very good in Germany as well. What I must say, it's just you just start on a different level here. So you a lot of times have the GTFS here already, and you have route planner apps already, but you can see that there's a lot more potential to integrate and make things more visible. Like when are you allowed to take your bike into the train, or like when is there a train that you can take a bike into the train, etc. And that's what we try to do. Like just what we try to do is like bring more visibility to the information that is available or not yet available to the users, and that can be applied in developing countries and also Germany. Next slide. Yeah, and that's like where we would tie that in. So, and for the city planning level, if you go to the next slide, we didn't have the chance to do a, so the only city where we just, I mean, we handed over the data to all the cities, but we didn't have a city yet that was interested, or we had the project to do like dashboards and like provide insights with the data that we generate around route suggestions or searches, etc. And but we wanted to showcase what you could do with the data, because you have GTFS data that gives the city first insights to the public transport infrastructure, because you see all the maps and the lines, etc. You can then also generate that data, or like if people use that data to do, or the city uses that data to do traffic planning or route suggestions, you can do traffic analysis in the end, because you can see how many people, what I mentioned earlier, travel on which streets, etc. And by improving, and they can also improve transportation planning in oversupplied and undersupplied areas, which means like just an easy example for this is a project that one of our colleagues, who I think is also in the call if I saw him, you could do a mapping of the city and see where the city has covered, which parts of the cities are covered good with public transport. And now if you look at the, I don't know, there's like a lot of squares where there is lines, but there's squares where in the middle there's like no routes or anything. You could now investigate, okay, we have bus stops here in this quadrant. We have 4 bus stops, but in between those bus stops, there's like no mobility services at all. So you can say, okay, if we put a scooter sharing station here, we could help people get to that public transport station so that they can use the public transport station better instead of using their car because the public transport station is too far away from their home. And that's how you can like step by step improve the city's public transport infrastructure. And then of course you can like generate real-time data once you start having a plan about where your buses should be driving and are driving, and you can integrate data that lead to new insights. Like you can generate you can generate new routes if you add, for example, bike accidents data. If you add bike accidents data, you can create apps that say, okay, the bike accidents on this street is it's quite high, so let's route the bikers a different way. It might take a little bit longer, but it's safer, for example, and things like that. Exactly. And that's like on the city planning or like, data usage of the data in the end level, which is TBD because we didn't have the plan to do, but we would have some ideas and are always still looking for projects. And in this regard, I hand over to Leo to do some closing remarks.
Yeah, but before, Dennis, I want to add something. We have other levels. Is the level of the engagement of the city. Sadly, in some places, and sadly in Latin America, we relate the transport, public transport with the poor people. Public transport is for the poor. Latin American, and it means that it's not in the first place of the public policies in some places. And the good news is that we can work and we can create this information even without help of the authorities. In Trufi, we prefer connect and work together with the authorities, but we can do without this help, only with the community, with the help of citizens, and that's the power of this technology of proximity in OpenStreetMap. Yeah. Okay, I will talk about some closing remarks. One important thing is that the public transport is requires planning. You need to know the route, the schedules, the time of the route, and the shape. We need information. In some places, we ask other people and sometimes get lost in some places, but it's a different to the private vehicles. We need planification and we need information. For this reason, it's important create this digital information in anywhere. Other thing important is that there is a lot of apps anywhere that when you can use these tools to use your car, but there is not tools in any place to use the public transport. It's easy use the car, not the public transport. Other thing important is that in insecure cities is desirable to have the estimated arrival time of vehicles to avoid being exposed of the streets. Sometimes in many cities you can stay for 15 minutes, 20 minutes in the streets, stand in some place and in dangerous place. And this technology can help to estimate. For example, you know that this is a low frequency route, for example, and you know that in the next 20 minutes it's not coming the bus, you stay in your house. It's especially important for women in some places. Tools like Trufi being technological sovereignty. It means that the territories can run by their own all the technology, avoiding the dependence of large multinationals. Some cities, I found this in many cities, that the authorities just wait that the big company solve the problem, and wait. It's not my problem. And for us, it's important that the authorities, the communities, the citizens of a place have all the control and the ownership of the technology and the data. This is important in our work. Thank you. That's all for our side. I don't know, Dennis, if you want to add something before the question and answers.
No, I just wanted to, and just to add like a comment to Ted, who is also part of Trufi. Yes, so everything, why the two German projects were so important to us is because we as an NGO always, so we finance us through projects, and every development that we do in like Germany, for example, we reinvest into the developing world. So all the things that get developed in Herrenberg are then available in Cochabamba and the other cities where our app is being used, and we just need to try to establish those features there, which is a process and a long process, because it comes all down to like changing or helping to change the public transport system in the end. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think that was very insightful. Are there any questions from the audience? I haven't seen any in the chat, but please feel free to just raise your hands and open your mic and just speak up now that we have the experts here in this room. I sure have some questions prepared, but please go ahead if you have any questions. But I was wondering, maybe just as a quick icebreaker here, when developing those apps, how do you keep them up to date? How do you keep the data up to date for those?
Trying to unmute myself. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
That's a good. Okay, that's a good question. I already hinted earlier how we do that, but there's different ways, of course, as well. So a lot of times, like big projects like the Cochabamba one, where you have 50,000 users, and you see that the community is very active. It's easier because you can have like you can interact with that very active community. You can have a community manager that helps do the requests or like feedbacks, work on the feedback from the community in that city. But what we also did is like try to, or like we developed a feature for the application itself where the users can get on the bus, press on like track route, and then it automatically, for example, tracks the route until you press stop tracking, and then it contributes that information to the open source or open data platform, which helps keep the data up to date. But in general, this is like the main challenge, to not call it problem, of open data. You need to keep it up to date and have people willing. You need to have people that are motivated to contribute there and help keep the data up to date. Yeah.
Thanks. I also see one hand is raised by Herman. Please speak up. Open your mic.
I hope you can hear me well. So thank you so much. This looks quite interesting, and greetings from Nairobi. I was actually curious. I was expecting to, because you had mentioned you had shown you've worked in Nairobi, so I would have been interested to see something from there, but I mean, I think the time is too short for that. My main question is, I mean, there is no communication between the app and the vehicle, right? So this definitely doesn't exist. So I was just curious, how then does that aspect of estimation of arrival time of the vehicle or the public transport mode come in? Maybe you mentioned this at some point, but I missed it, and I was just curious to know how this works out. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. It's an important question also. It's very interesting. We use the center of our technology is OpenTrip Planner. That is an open source solution that works with GTFS and also works with GTFS in real time. We can connect and we can connect the position in real time from the vehicles and put it in the main platform that is OpenTrip Planner. And this platform and this software can resolve and estimate the real time in real time way the estimation of the coming of the bus stops when a user demand for a trip planning. It's a standard and it's very mature in this moment, and it's the standard way to do that.
Thank you, Leo. Are there any other questions? I see that Carlos, you raised a question in the chat. Would you like to speak up and ask yourself?
Yes. Hello. I was just curious, Leo, how are you? If you could expand a little bit more about cost and timeframes on the design, planning, and also in the implementation phases.
It depends a lot of the size of the city on the complexity of the public transport system. But for example, to have an idea, in the case of Nouakchott, we create all the digital information from scratch without any order. And we create all the information of the GTFS data in less than 3 months. And the scope, if we have help of authorities of a local community for an entire project, is more or less 6 months. And the price is a hard question. It depends also the complexity of the system. But for example, in Nouakchott, we work together. The project was funded by the World Bank, and it's a project of $35,000, more or less. This is the size of this is the amount of this kind of project. But if you need to connect more feature like real time or something, it's different, Carlos. Thanks for the question.
So it's a good ballpark number, let's say. But just an example as well for the Stadtnavi app. The Stadtnavi project was a 10 weeks project. We set up, since our application is a white label application, you can pretty much set it up in like 2 weeks. Like 1 week setting it up, second week configuring like the very basic stuff, because it all depends on the white label. And of course, the more complexity you bring in, the more new data sources or data types or mobility services, etc. you bring in, the longer it takes. But usually we have such a big network and like community that are willing to help that it's quite it's possible in quite short amount of time.
Thanks for sharing those numbers, Dennis. I think we have time for one more question. So is there another one from the audience, from the Aachen students, maybe also on this whole topic on informal transport?
You can always, of course, reach out. I don't know if once you share this, Lena, so you can add our emails as well. We didn't add them to the last slide, but of course, always feel free to reach out, or also if you're interested in helping, volunteering, wanting to see how we work, of course.
Thanks, Dennis. Yes, we can share the presentation with all of you, of course, afterwards. Okay, if there are no more questions, last chance now. And I would say we can close the meeting for today. Thank you so much, Dennis and Leo, for being here and introducing us to informal transport and how digitalization can help to make the service, or to help us understand the service and to maybe make it even more efficient. So thanks, everyone, and have a nice Friday.
Thank you. Have a nice weekend. Bye.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Bye.